For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Enormous blocks of stone, gigantic, weighing hundreds of tons. Massive, completely anonymous monuments about which we know nothing.
They are not fallen angels. They are critters.
We are sharing the planet with a species that's possibly as far in advance of us as we are from chimpanzees.
Guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
The following sentence, which I think will be sort of a summary of our conversation. It seems to me that a definite picture is emerging, a picture composed of epigenetics, transhumanism, brain dysfunction, autism, psychopathology, vaccination, EMF saturation, targeted humans, electronic mind control, drought by HAARP and geoengineering, de facto non-government, corporations pretending to be government, circumcision, religions, Masonic courts, Common Core education, funny money, all tied together by big brain mathematical cone heads intent on managing their small brain herd. Now, that is sort of what brought us to this point. Could you, taking that as sort of a point of departure, sort of the theme for or the background of our talk today, tell us what brought you to the discovery of Homo capensis, of the two species of large brain humanoids, and your theories about how they may be controlling world events, and bring us into this whole world, which many of us know nothing about.
Well, thank you. I have the problem right now that I always have of this. How can I put this all out there in a paragraph or less? And I'm forced, I think, or it's best perhaps that I give just a little history on how I got that way. And that I was reading L. Fletcher Prouty, and he pointed out that Buckminster Fuller traveled all over the world, and wherever he went, the people who were supposed to be in charge were not in charge. They always answered to someone higher. And I thought, well, I can figure that out. I'm obsessive, and I don't know what else I can do. Chugging along with neurology, which didn't seem satisfying, and I know more now on why that's the case. So I went forward, sort of studying things, and starting actually with the Shakespeare authorship question, because I saw this program on William Shakespeare and who it really was, and I found that absolutely fascinating. And I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. Or not. That's fun. It's not. The
17th
nice.
Earl of Oxford. No, I mean that unless that's germane to the topic of the Coneheads.
Well, yeah, okay. The one thing that I did learn that, and it's probably worth saying, is that you can't trust documents.
Yeah.
A document comes to you from the past. It can be just total lies written to fool you and everybody else in line. And then I began to study the other things, the nasty stuff that's going on with the world, the Kennedy assassination, and went forward. And part of my efforts was to contact the writer Eustace Mullins. And actually, I located him because of something he wrote on the internet, which was the contract murder of Eustace Mullins by Eustace Mullins. So I got hold of him eventually and brought him out to the San Francisco Bay Area on a speaking tour. And of course, the forces, the Mossad, he would say, and anyone whoever's running the program that calls him an anti-Semitic, did everything they could to block his talking. And it's pretty simple to say that these people they would call themselves, but then that's a whole nother story that we could get into. But anyway, my understanding of all this has to go through the land of the people, of the Hebrew nation, because they are critically important in all of this, and they are, to jump ahead, they are super bamboozled. They have been fooled, and we all have been fooled. It's just that they're smarter than we are. I think of an average IQ of 117 versus, say, 100 for Europeans. And as a result, they seem to have been more fooled. And that's a principle I believe operates everywhere. The smarter a human being is, the more readily is he bamboozled. So I began with that. We brought Eustace out here. They did everything they could to block him talking. At one point, somebody who kind of inserted himself into the little group I had started told me, "Don't do it. Don't bring him out here. You'll be killed." And that's sort of a strong statement, but I brought him out here anyway, and I wasn't killed. But then Eustace did get kidnapped after he went back to Virginia. That's another pathway of this story. While we were driving through Oakland after an aborted effort to give a talk at the Grand Lakes Theater, which was primarily attended by the probably ADL, I asked Eustace, are the Illuminati hiding behind the Jews, or are the Jews hiding behind the Illuminati? And he said the Jews are hiding behind the Illuminati instantly. He said that. And he also introduced me to a book, Mullins' New History of the Jews, in which he stated that something in this nation had taken down Babylon, Persia, Greece, Egypt, and Rome, all by subversion. They just sort of collapsed and fell in. And he also noted that the Romans understood what had happened, that Julius Caesar had been murdered because he couldn't control or wouldn't control or whatever we're talking about in terms of, that's sort of a cover term, which of course is misused all over the place. And then they went and managed to establish the Eastern Roman Empire, and what they did in that point was they did not allow us to be in government or education, and I think they had a gold currency, so that covered that. And as a result of that, Byzantium lasted a bit more than 1,000 years until it was taken down by a combined military forces of Venice and Turkey. And we don't know about the success of the Byzantium Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. That's blocked out because there are certain things that we're not supposed to know. And it's obviously that is one of them. So I got hold of the book. I continued working. And what I noticed that everything seemed to be an attack on Western civilization. That anything west was being trashed, and of course that everybody's at everybody's throats. I then, but after discovering what Eustace said about the nation, the question then became, well, if this is true, how could they learn how to do it almost from the beginning, almost instantly? They came into being, and then they were absolute masters at dismantling civilizations. And of course, then there's the question of why would they want to do that? Why would the Mossad motto be, by way of deception, thou shalt do war? That question, of course, is there. But the other was, but perhaps even more pressing was, how could they learn how to do this? Where did that sort of knowledge or experience come from? Or just the battle plan? And I was continuing my research, and then I discovered something else, and this was through the maps of the ancient sea kings. This was through Graham Hancock, who knows so very much. And this is that the entire Earth was mapped during the Ice Age. And we're talking now, the Ice Age ended on the order of 17,000 years ago with the glacial meltdown. These maps, the Piraeus map in particular, show in great detail the coast of Antarctica. And this is precise. I think it was the Swedish-British expedition of 1949 went over this with ground radar or whatever the technology was at the time. And this is accurate. And so it was, but now there's a mile of ice over the coast. But the map, Piraeus maps, show a coast without ice. And how could this be? And this was even commented on by Charles Hapgood's friend in the United States Air Force there, and the Ohlmeyer letter. And part of this communication to Hapgood was that these maps required, most likely were produced by someone who understood spherical trigonometry. So we have all of this. We have the maps. We have the Earth mapped by somebody who knows spherical trigonometry more than 17,000 years ago. We're talking about, many tens of thousands of years ago, and to do something like to make those maps. And the maps have come down to us. They've been compiled and copied and brought down. We don't have the original maps that I know of. And so suddenly, with that bit of information, it became clear that there was a time scale, a time frame available for allowing the Hebrew nation, or something in the new Hebrew nation, which is probably a better way of putting it, because the Jews like to clump together and take the blame, take the credit for everything, but they're obviously being manipulated. And at this point, it became clear that there was a time scale and a civilization that had existed in the past and encompassed the entire world that could have taught this lesson on how to take down a civilization. And I wrote something at that point that was who controls the world? Could it be a cabal we've never considered? I believe I sent that to you. And so I thought, well, I still was thinking, how could this be that it still required, this was something that had taken place over many thousands of years, over many tens of thousands of years. What was the institution that did it? What was clear secret societies are inimical to civilization, actually humanity. But how, what was it precisely that did this? But it looked like that it was the actions of men who worshiped secrecy, were involved with the occult, and that they had brought this training forward. And at that point, it was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle that described the book, or mentioned the book Big Brain. And I obtained this book, and I could even pull it off the shelf
Yeah,
and show it to
yeah.
you at some point.
Yeah, what's the name of the book again?
Big Brain. Want me
Big
to pull it
Brain.
off the shelf here?
Sure.
I think it's 2008. Big Brain, by a couple of neuroscientists, Gary Lynch and Richard Granger, PhD. And this book starts with Homo capensis, or uses that as the basis for writing this book, and the future of human intelligence. And I hope there is a future for human intelligence, or there is a human intelligence in the future. But what it amounts to is that in about 1913 or 12, I get mixed up on that, a couple of workers in Boskop, South Africa, encountered a skull. And they didn't know what it was. They encountered fragments of the skull. So they took it to the local museum. And he said, this is way different. And it finally got to be studied quite intensively. And a fellow by the name of R. Broom, a paleontologist, renowned paleontologist by the name of R. Broom, studied it and wrote this paper. I sent you the link on that, I believe. I sent that as a PDF, but since I've got one here, I might as well pull it out because it's sort of wonderful.
Right. The anthropological papers.
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
And what Broom discovered was that something that looked like a human, but had a brain capacity of about 30% more. The facial features were human. He had a very massive jaw and large incisors and canine teeth. And he thought that this specimen was sufficiently different from anything else to call it a species. And he said this was Homo capensis. And Karen Hudis liked this name when I was talking to her. So a lot of people know about Homo capensis. So Lynch and Granger wrote about Homo capensis. They did an estimation of IQ, and the way this went was that they calculated, and this was very conservative and, of course, not accurate and not precise in terms of what we think of as IQ study, but the increase in the size of the association area for a brain 30% larger. And what they came up with was an average IQ of 149, with 10 to 15% of the population at 180 or above. And so you look at that and you say, well, we have a candidate for Earth Mapper here. And then, of course, there's more. British paleontology got very excited over this and, wanted to know more. But then something happened close to home that took their mind off of distant Africa, and that was Piltdown Man, which was, I think, discovered about 100 miles from the home of Charles Darwin. And apparently this really swept Homo capensis off the stage. And Piltdown Man is a hoax. So that was interesting little bit of coincidence. So at that point, it seemed probable that we had something that was not human that was in control of this civilization, this Earth mapping civilization during the Ice Age, and also built along the seacoast all around the world megalithic structures, such as, I think, Yamaguchi in Japan. I never pronounce it correctly. And that are now underwater. So this seemed like this all fit together. This was a new way of looking at things. And then one wondered, this book, Big Brain, deals with it with one sentence. It's extinct. And the question is it extinct? Is that being extinct? Well, actually, I think the answer is a very solid no there, because people have cited individuals' very large heads that probably match the description of Homo capensis. And the sightings have been in Cairo and Portugal and South Africa. And so it would have, and the report on South Africa was, is a very sharp individual, very wicked businessman, trading in copper, I believe, and black, and had other features, but just not a standard sort of person, but very smart. Then also there are reports of Portugal with these beings, these individuals being in finance, even got involved with the finance world. There's a report I have from the United States, which is most incredible, most bizarre. But anyway, it would seem that Homo capensis is not extinct, and that.
So these are sightings of Homo capensis that you've had in modern times that are operating in modern fields such as finance.
Right. And we don't know for sure, of course, if it's Homo capensis, because but we're getting reports of individuals which are striking and suddenly fall into that category more readily than just straight old humans. So that looked like that really could explain a lot in what happened in the world during the Ice Age. That we had another species in charge. Now, there's a coda in this book, Big Brain, just about 100 miles from the original Boscop discovery site. Further excavations were once carried out by none other than our infatigable museum director, who got it all going, Frederick Fitzsimmons. He knew what he had discovered and was eagerly seeking more of these skulls. At his new dig site, he came across a remarkable piece of construction. The site had been at one time a communal living center, perhaps tens of thousands of years ago. There were many collected rocks, leftover bones, and some casually interred skeletons of normal-looking humans. But to one side of the site, in a clearing, was a single, carefully constructed tomb built for a single occupant. Perhaps the tomb of a leader or of a reverend wise man. His remains had positioned to face the rising sun. In repose, he appeared unremarkable in every regard except for a giant skull. So I would take that as indicating that this giant skull, giant head, was dominant over human beings in that area. That's in this area in Boscop. But then there's more to the South African story, and there's more to the large skulls. There's I can identify by description at least two species. The first, identification made simple because Robert Broom did it, and found Homo capensis. The second species are these giant cone heads. And I'll hold this up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a book by Brien, Brien, Foerster. He does tremendously good work.
Mm-hmm.
He does fabulous work, and he stays away from funding by the establishment, because we know where that goes. He found these skulls in Ica, Peru, and this is a picture that I send out. I don't know if I'm going to find it. That I really have sent out with a lot of my emails. Here they are. Now, the interesting thing here is one of them, at least in this picture, has hair and skin attached to the skull. So it's a real candidate for DNA analysis. Brian has done some DNA work, and it's not, it's expensive and it's difficult. And his findings at first was not human. I've sent this pictures of this to a number of people, and paleontologists, and also to Brian Sykes, DNA guru at Oxford. And I don't hear back. And so this big cone head has these following features, which Foster has described. They're big, they're heavy. The eyes, the orbits are 20% larger. Bones are rather heavy. There is one parietal plate instead of two, like humans. There are two occipital foramina high in the occipital region. The brain capacity is much larger than human, as you might expect, seeing that you have a human face, everything with that head going up. I think on the order is at least 50% larger, maybe going out towards 200%. Then there are, and the dentition is interesting because these skulls have few or no molars, yet they have very powerful incisors and canines. So they really look like they're carnivores. So there you go. Something that's a carnivore, doesn't like spinach probably because he doesn't have any molars. Very high IQ. And not studied. I sent those pictures to some paleontologists in the United States, a group that's looking for Sasquatch. This group based out of Idaho. I don't have the information right in front of me. Yeah, well, if they're looking for Sasquatch, maybe they'd like to look for something like this. The answer is no. And I even called up. I said, "Did you see their pictures?" And then I called up, and then I sent the pictures again. People don't want to know. They don't want to go there. Now, one of the things I sent you was fragment enchilada is what I named it, called it, because in all of the flurry of emails I sent out, by accident, a director of the facility missed the first one on showing these pictures of these skulls, the letter to Brian Sykes. And so he wrote back saying that, the Homo capensis was just pieces found in a ditch, and it wasn't hadn't been formally found, so to speak. But you have to have an actual archaeological site to find it, and they didn't think it was of any importance. And the interesting thing, of course, is that this broom paper, can't ignore it. It's a very solid piece of scientific work. So it's just not mentioned. I went through the book on forbidden archaeology. They have a lot of papers by Broom, but not that one. And then there's another book which is supposed to be everything there is to know about human paleontology. I can. You've got that paper. Unfortunately, I can't give you the names right now, but it's not there. I was just I'm searching the book online. I don't have it in my hands, but a lot of stuff by Robert Broom, but this incredible paper on Homo capensis is not there. Well, I would have to say that what we're seeing here is a Sherlock Holmes approach or event. The dog didn't bark, The dog should really just bark its head off when it sees some of this stuff, but it doesn't. And I think this is evidence. Though I don't know exactly the best way to describe this evidence as non-dog barking evidence. But it fits in with everything else. This fact that everything is upside down. This is the way Desiree Rover has described it, that medicine is there to make you sick and the law is there to do criminal activity, and the government is a phony, and the news is there to misinform you. I mean, and it's absolutely true. We live in a world that is entirely upside down, in which the major operational motif is conspiracy all the time. And I don't know what to call it because people don't like that word. I thought of organized deception and assault to try and fractionate it. But that's I've tried to talk to people about conspiracy, and I was talking to a woman in Whole Foods. She was having coffee together, and she was a nice lady. So I just said, are you interested in conspiracy? I mean, and her change in her face and her behavior was incredible. You would think that I had asked her to do something quite awful on the camera. I mean, but it's like, well, are you interested in conspiracy? No, I mean, it's a huge emotional reaction, negative emotional reaction. And of course, that was one of the more remarkable reactions I've seen, but I've encountered a lot of them. And yet, everything is a conspiracy. I don't know what isn't.
Right, right. Now, but just to get clear, so you've come across evidence of these skulls dated back, to about 280,000 years ago, or?
That's hard to know, but it's on the order of at least, I would say, 50,000 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Now, so from that data, how do you arrive at ascribing the current state of dystopia and the current, say, intentional depopulation program with all of its different facets, which one, according to Occam's razor, can say, well, that is a certain type of elite which is doing that. Why does one have to posit that these are big brains that have been manipulating Homo sapiens society, us, from behind the scenes for many thousand years and culling us every so often? Why? How is it that you make that leap? That
right?
Yeah.
Well, that certainly is a leap, or it seems to be a leap. And sort of the basis of all of this is the Homo sapiens capable of doing this? is Homo sapiens capable of putting this together without leaving tracks? And what is their motive? And the motive, motive, I think, is significant because you can make an argument that they control the world. They lost the control for reasons we don't know fully, but certainly it looked like the glacial meltdown and the incredible upheaval had part of it, and they want to reestablish overt control. Now that makes more sense to me than a bunch of secret society guys destroying everybody. I mean, the goal, the reward for getting humanity totally under control is that you then have total control of the planet, and you don't have to stay underground. That I should say something about Africa, about the great civilization in Africa before I go forward with this.
Okay.
This sort of comes from these books. This is Adam's calendar.
Right. I've been there.
You've been there.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I'll have to ask you what you think. And did you get into this part? The great civilization that's probably a little bit north of that?
Yes. I interviewed the author of that book, Michael Tellinger.
Yeah.
Now you take issue with Michael's theories. Is that
I'll say.
correct? Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah. Could you walk us through what it is about Michael's theories that you take issue with?
Well, that the Anunnaki came to Earth, and that these are extraterrestrials that built these tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of stone silos as energy-producing devices, without much detail on how they would produce energy or how the energy would be used. These silos are of crude stones piled together. It took a lot of work for somebody to pile up these stones. And what you've got then is this silo that has no doors or windows, and is supposed to be part of an energy-producing system. That's very interesting that the Anunnaki came to Earth and they found the daughters of mankind fetching and mated with them. That's in all of there. But the energy business, that these crude stones being piled up by beings that came from outer space, or directed by the Anunnaki or something that came here, seems very weak. And this gets in, of course, into the whole business of extraterrestrials, space travel, and technology at a particular time. I came there. I encountered, so to speak, this Tellinger's work and his really beautiful book. And I came there by way of Boskop, so to speak, and Fitzsimmons. And I knew that the big brain was a little bit south of this, was in charge of humans. You know, that we were thrown into the ground. He had a tomb. And there's similar to that over in Ica, Peru, too. So it's reasonable to question or to wonder if this great civilization north of Boskop was put together by flesh and blood beings that were not human, but were probably, most likely, since we have one example, large-brained hominids. Mm-hmm. And with Adam's calendar, there's another aspect which is interesting in that, I think it's very crude. The stones are just plopped there quite precisely, but it's not an artistic tour de force. They've just piled the rocks there, but they've put them so that they match, I guess, Orion's belt along the horizon on the order of 70,000 years ago, 75. That's the time scale I'm using for all of this. So that doesn't look like human work to me. Plus the fact we don't have any record or any message in the bottle from there. It's very, very crude. I mean, Stonehenge, they get these things that are just perfect for the solstice, but they use these big rocks. And I put in the PowerPoint, which I think I sent you, some new cave paintings about 70,000 years ago, and the difference in artistic ability is really profound.
Yeah. Well, of course, one of Tellinger's working theories is that this network of stone circles, which reaches all the way up to Zimbabwe, is actually a mode of sound technology, that is part of a teleportation device by which the controller civilization there teleported the gold that they mined down to the central collection point and then teleported it either up to their planet or to their ships. That's what he says. I'm just giving you his theory.
That's what he says. And what my take on this is, I think the Wright brothers flew about in 1903, and look what aviation is like now, and what Tesla lived in about 1908, and the supercomputer came along in about 1960. So what sort of technology do you have a million years, 10,000 years hence? We can't imagine it. But I do not see technology advanced not being able to make gold, because the cold fusion devices produce elements. They find iron there that's not been there, specks of iron. I mean, cold fusion works. I don't know how advanced any system is at this point, but it was buried. It was knocked down by a suppression, and so that's there. A couple of guys in a lab are able to do that. What can you do with a sustained effort for 10,000 years? So to look at something, to a bunch of rocks that have been stacked up, and say that they're a high tech, to me is weak. Now, I think what they are, what these stone silos are pins for two-legged chattel, whatever it was at the time. And you can see with a ladder down inside and a ladder outside, you climb up, you walk down, you pull the ladder up, and you've got them trapped, especially if the walls have been plastered, so there's no climbing a circular wall. That seems, and then you have these two-legged chattel that work the fields, pile up more rocks, and do that sort of stuff. They don't use sound to fly to another galaxy or whatever, and you can lose it with all of this, because I don't think there's been any evidence of another intelligence-bearing planet found in this galaxy. And if you look at the Earth, you can see that it takes a lot of things to come together for this to happen, including, the Earth makes water in the magma. That's where the water comes from. It makes oil, which maybe is not so critical, but it does make makes water, and it's positioned so that we have water as fluid and not as ice all of the time. And we've got this nice planet Jupiter out there, great big thing, which sucks up a lot of comets and debris flowing in that would otherwise hit the Earth. So there's a lot of stuff that went together to make Earth, and I don't think there's anything like this found anywhere in the galaxy. And then, it's likely that this did occur somewhere, that it's gone on in this vast universe. But we're talking about walking distance, 100,000 light years. So it doesn't seem likely. Then there are other aspects into this, and the whole business of this gets into the TI and the Robert Duncan and the EEG heterodyning. I guess Robert Malik is the one that you can capture the entire EEG with the radar system, and you can put it back in, and we're all brain swayed in some way at this point. There's voice to skull going on there. You're talking to the people in the UK, in Europe, and Isa Acta in the US, and part of all of this is the alien abduction, which I think began in about 1960 or something like that. And so one can say, from what we know now, that there are two broad areas that this might be. One, they really are aliens that came here in spaceships, and they fly around and we see them and we don't take good pictures, and they abduct these people and do incredibly primitive things, sexual things, probe them, really kind of very, very, very primitive. Or that this is an experience of EEG heterodyning, if that is the word, and the technology discovered by Robert Malik and advanced, and that these are events of mind control that have hit people. Now there's more than alien abduction going on here. There's also there was the Mothman phenomenon. Did you ever see the movie Mothman?
I may have seen different features on it over time.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun movie, and I never really, on the first time I saw it, I thought, well, that's kind of fun. But then watched it on television just recently, and I thought, wait a minute, this is looking too familiar. And so there was this Mothman phenomenon in West Virginia. People saw this thing with the big eyes. They have a lot of news paper articles in this book. I would recommend this book. Donnie Sargent and Jeff Walmsley. And apparently there were men in black cruising around the area at that time. And I think this was in 1966, if I get that right. And then it ended with the collapse of a bridge. One support on the bridge failed, and about 30 some odd people died. So, what was this? I would interpret this as being an experiment.
Right. Now, we're already 15 minutes into this segment, and we've only got about 40 minutes left. And I still haven't gotten the critical path of the theory. And by the critical path, I mean is this. Okay, so we have skulls both in North America, in the African continent, perhaps elsewhere, that 50,000, 70,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, say, okay, there are at least one, perhaps two species there, the coneheads, the Homo capensis, okay?
Yeah.
What's the critical path? We've spent time there. That's established. What I'd like to spend the next 40 minutes on is following the critical path from that point up to the present day that that shows that, or that elucidates that there's a hidden civilization of coneheads or Homo capensis that are the secret controllers of our human society, and that currently they're culling the herd. Is there any way that you can do that? That say, okay, this is what happened over history, and this is how they're operating now. They're behind the Vatican. They're behind the monetary system. They're behind war, disease, crime, and poverty. They're behind all of this. They are the people from Mars. They're behind. They are the controllers of planet Earth, which I think is your thesis. Can you go through that and establish that critical path and show us structurally now in the present how it is that the secrets of civilization of coneheads exists, and what's their dimensional ecology, what's their interaction, where do they live, how do they operate?
Okay. Well, this takes us back to Egypt and Akhenaten. You've seen that stuff. The question is Akhenaten, was Akhenaten human? It doesn't look that way. His daughters, Nefertiti, the people who are supposed to be his daughters, had these unusual skulls. I mean, unusual is a certain an understatement. They look like, a pretty face on a blimp. Akhenaten always was wearing a high hat, as was Nefertiti. Some of the images, show them with thin coverings over very large heads. Then Akhenaten appears to have not been human. One might think he was human, but now that we know that there are coneheads and Homo capensis, that seems more probable than he was just a guy with a big head. So then we have to look at what Akhenaten was all about. And he was out to wreck Egypt. There's this, I think Donald Redford was one of the first Egyptologists that went into what was going on with Akhenaten, and he introduced monotheism and changed the religious structure around in Egypt and created a great turmoil and was not loved. There's another good book by Nicholas Reeves. So Akhenaten appears to not be human, and one must remember that everything is contaminated and conspiracy everywhere. So when somebody finds something, they'll say it's Akhenaten or it's not Akhenaten, and we don't know. There's nothing but lies coming at us, and archaeology is full of lies, maybe as bad as medicine. And the Egyptology, one can see why that is very much damaged by who gets the grants and who does not, and that sort of thing. But they have gone forward and found stuff. So Akhenaten would appear to be, I think with a high probability, a pharaoh that wanted to damage Egypt and actually did so. And a pharaoh that was not a human being, but was a conehead type, most probably, that we don't have to say he was just a guy with a big head. We now have other species out there, and he was probably that sort of that species. Then so, but the way I looked at this, that given that the Jewish nation had in some way been instructed or trained or in some way subverted to do what they do, they should have then, if my theory is correct, have had contact with big brains at some point in their history. That seems like a reasonable hypothesis to put forward.
Okay.
Then it turns out there's a series of books that have. This is by Ahmed Osman, and I think maybe who was the psychologist or psychiatrist thought of this, but it turns out then that Akhenaten had a second life, a second career, and Osman has him as Moses, and this book, Secrets of the Exodus, by Masad and Roger Sabat, two French rabbis,